What up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Nerd Gen Report. I'm your host, Pablo, and joining me, as always, is Mr. Brian Schultz. Brian, James Gunn speaks again, and this time in what's the article's name? Or the
Entertainment Weekly.
Entertainment
He's been
Weekly.
everywhere though. He's been everywhere though. This
Yeah,
article
yeah.
is, and we had someone bring it up on our show. We were aware of it. It's emblematic of the commentary that he's making, stuff he's being asked. But he goes into some depth on a couple of things we didn't cover in the last James Gunn Speaks episode. So we'll try to cover that here.
Yeah. So he talks more Superman. By the way, I don't know if you've steered away from some of the, you know how they tend to do those single scene releases of the
Haven't
movie.
seen
You
any.
stayed away. Okay. I've seen a couple. I'm not saying anything until I see the actual movie. But in this Entertainment Weekly piece, he goes over a lot. We're not going to go over a whole bunch of stuff because a lot of the stuff we've already covered. But some specifically with regards to Superman, some of the things, how Peter Safran and himself are sort of dividing and conquer, I guess. Some of the things that he seems a little bit coy in terms of speaking further about, but I think these are things that we've discussed in terms of what he will be directing. There's one specific thing that he said about a TV show that he's working on that he didn't really speak too much of. I'm wondering what's that about. But the script for Superman 2 for us is world's finest. You heard it here. We've been talking about it for quite some time already. That seems the most likely scenario. But Brian, what do you want to go over first?
Why don't we actually start with the process? Because it's really the first time I can remember where he really talks about the working relationship with Saffron and exactly how involved he gets personally in the different parts of the universe, which I think is notable, especially as we're getting more content and they're announcing more content. And we just have gone through this exercise where one of the questions put forth around Marvel is, how much of what's happened in terms of their fall off is related to Kevin being spread too thin. Is that just a narrative? Is that real? And so Gunn gets pretty candid about the question was simply put to him, what has it been like juggling your responsibility as writing and directing Superman and co-head DC Studios? And that led into this response. So he said, first, the balance is between specific creative and macro creative, not creative and business. So he said, Peter Safran does all of the business stuff. He does all of the business meetings. He's like, I only work on the writing and the directing side. But then he says, but I also shepherd the other writers and directors. So, quote, it's trying to come up with other ideas for other shows and the other movies that I give to the other writers to take care of so that my job is all creative. And then he says, that said, it's a bit too much at times. I can't do everything. So I've had to try to focus on what I can focus on, which has been a big part of my learning process over the past couple years with this job. Because if I try to do everything, it's too little of any one thing. So I need to really focus on certain pieces of what's happening, end quote. That's pretty honest. I mean, I would say, what's your reaction to the idea that, yes, he's the invisible hand, but he's kind of admitting he doesn't have both hands on the steering wheel for at least some of what's going to be put out.
I think the role that he's in is familiar to what he was doing with Marvel in terms of giving his notes and letting people do their thing. And a lot's going on in terms of building this DC world that he's trying to build. And so he's trying to not be involved so much that he even has people responding for him on social media because he can't do it all, right? And it becomes much and trying to debunk. So he's juggling and trying to find his rhythm in terms of his role. But I find it similar to what he was doing in Marvel, but more of an authoritative presence in that creative aspect of it.
I think that's right. And I think he then makes a second point, which I think is really important here, which is that I don't think this is a huge surprise, but I think in some ways it's a little less structured than Marvel, because Marvel, we know, had Kevin and the Parliament. They were the people in the room. And it felt like the writers and the directors, everyone kind of orbited around that one core group. Gunn talks about this idea of like he has his collaborators, but that group is more fluid. So here's what he says. He's like, when I find somebody terrific, as in what I found with Damon Lindelof or Chris Mundy, who are running, and Tom King, who are running Lanterns, then I just read the scripts, I give them the notes, but I let them go do their thing. I mean, I'll watch the dailies and make sure things are going okay, and then I'll watch when we start getting the cuts in. But then he says, I'll give notes on specific cuts, whereas if I was more involved in the writing phase, for instance, of Supergirl, because that was something that was one of the first ideas I had when I came to work at DC. So he's kind of saying these individual people can pitch him and earn his trust. And based upon that trust, he will be less involved. Whereas there are other ones where it's like, well, I had some ownership of this. I can't let that go. I've got to, which file that one away, because in our Batman discussion, file that one away, because I think that's really critical to where Batman is going to end up in the DCU. But I think it's sort of an admission of there is no parliament here. That group increases or decreases based upon the ideas in the room, right? So the Lanterns guys showed up for Lanterns. They didn't show up for 12 DC projects, right? They're doing, like Chris Mundy and Damon Lindelof are doing one project. Now that may become others, but for right now, they're working together because of this one thing. So that's a little different than the way Marvel does it. And I think Gunn would argue to you, he's sort of trying to pitch you on it's empowering those creators a little more versus having this one supervisory body that's just like handing out all of the orders. Well, again, it could work, it could not work. I just think it's interesting that he's describing it in that way. This is where I go back and forth. So to your point, we know he was one of two script doctors effectively for Marvel movies, uncredited on a bunch, but basically all the way through Marvel's heyday, James Gunn and Joss Whedon were kind of asked for their take. And basically, as we understand it from the rise of the MCU, would do like little rewrites, would do little kind of like suggestions on how to shoot or reshoot. And so some of what we saw was their vision mixed in with the Russo's vision, mixed in with whatever director. I would say probably not in every project. Like I would guess, for example, Black Panther, that was not the case. Everything we know about that project, Ryan Coogler had complete control of it. So it wasn't unilateral, but I think the Avengers movies, Doc Strange, Ant-Man, like Cap 3, like that sort of stuff, absolutely. Like one of those two guys was in the room. When he talks about doing the same thing here, that thing about like, if I had the idea or if I had anything to do with the idea, does that make you nervous at all? That like, because this guy has a lot of ideas, right? This guy does have a ton of ideas. He's very prolific. He writes very fast. I could see where this goes from being like helpful to being meddlesome, where it's almost like he starts to clash with other collaborators because he feels like he had more of a hand in this character or this project than whoever it is that's actually writing and directing it.
I mean, I think it goes back to that trust factor again. I think if the people involved in sort of creating this project will be based on their thoughts about what needs to be done and what should be done, he'll give his notes, and based upon what he's seeing in the dailies, he will give his input and then let them do their thing. If he is the one shepherding some of these ideas, I feel like he holds that one a little bit more closer to him wanting to participate more in the development and ultimately the final product. Or depending on the character, he'll take over, right?
That's the Batman thing in the back of my mind, right?
Oh,
of all
yeah.
This, it just feels like there's this undercurrent of, and he said it, right? Like with Batman, where he's kind of like in our previous show, he dropped that nugget of kind of like, he has a vision. He has a way in. How do I get my way in onto the screen, even though he's sort of implying there's other people in the room he's supposed to be collaborating with? I agree with you. I think it leads to ultimately him saying, it's Batman, I got to direct it. And we'll see how people react to James Gunn Batman. But like, this can go either way. It could be really helpful in the right instance, but it could also drive some people away who are kind of like, yo, like I know what I'm doing here. And this is mine. It's I work for you in DC, but like you're not directing this.
Hence
Like,
the Clayface situation. I don't think he has really nothing to do with that one other than his notes per se, right? But we seem to be on the money when it says, when they say, this is going to be a rated R horror. We've been calling this even before it even came out. As soon as it was announced, we've been calling for the idea of Clayface and what it should be, and we've been right on it. He was pitched the idea, and he was like, "Yo, go for it," right? And he'll give his notes on it, but ultimately, the people that came to him with this idea are the ones that are going to be shepherding the final product. And we've discussed before, we had a bit of concern when there was some shakeup in terms of the script, that it was being rewritten, but that does not seem to be the case. It is still a lot of Flanagan's idea and what he's written. And again, James Gunn, yes, he is a prolific writer. He writes fast, but not all of it is good. Let's just keep it 100.
No, it's not. That's why I asked the question. Yeah.
And not necessarily that is not good, is that his way of writing includes a lot of dialogue that, as we said in our previous show regarding Superman, and the notes that he got back, not from execs, but from audience members in the test screening, dial it back with the funny. Because you're not funny, dude. I'm sorry, you're not. You know what I'm saying? And I think that is going to translate into Superman. We're not going to get any laugh out loud sort of situations with Superman. At least I don't think.
Well, I think that depends. I think that depends on the age of the person watching. I really think, like, the little bits that I've seen with the dog, I think there are some things that kids are going to be giggling and laughing at. And that's the point of that. Whereas I think for us, we just kind of like, if you enjoy it, you got to enjoy it through your kid. It's not really meant for you. So, but I agree. My impression of him as an individual, though, and it comes through in this piece, is that he wants to be everywhere. Like the inner nerd in him.
Of course.
I think he's fighting. He's kind of telling you, I'm fighting myself, because his own instinct would be like, I want to be knee deep in all of these, and I'm being forced to not be because there's just too much.
And I understand his sentiment, because this is something new and that rivals his counterpart, and him taking all of that he knows and his experience and doing something completely different. This is obviously, I think, the turning point, where Marvel was once at the top and DC at the very bottom with their attempt of producing similar results. And this is this is the beginning of something, I think, transformative in terms of how superhero films are made. And he's the one in front of all of this. So, like we've said in the past, Superman obviously can't fail, and it seems that it's getting good feedback so far by people who've seen it.
First 30 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a test screening, which is the unfinished cut, but no one has seen the finished cut other than the first 30 minutes, which has been put out.
But so far,
those reactions have been fine. But you expect the reactions to be good. So
yeah.
No, I think it's a difference between, though, like, and Kevin fell into this too. It's the difference between a great creator or executor and being a great CEO, right? Like, because being a great CEO is about delegation. It is about scalability. It is about letting go to just the right degree, but having the right people around you to carry out the vision, right? And so, like, Kevin, up to a point, could rely on his own instincts to drive the majority of the MCU with great results. I think what we found out is, like, the people he put around him in the Parliament, when they were kind of given the reins of the projects and made the senior producers or the senior creatives, that was far more hit or miss. And I think if you looked at any great Fortune 500 company, you would tend to find, like, You have an excellent CEO, you tend to have excellent line managers, right? Succession, people that can take over as CEO someday. Like Marvel clearly doesn't have that. Star Wars clearly doesn't have that. Like, and DC remains to be seen. And so what James Gunn understands is while Superman, Batman, these characters are eternal, his reign as head of DC is not. He gets one shot. You get one chance. You don't get to rebuild this 3 or 4 times. Like you get one chance to bring this to life. So the next thing he talks about, which I thought was interesting, I want to get your reaction on, was the filming of Superman, and specifically that one controversial, I don't know what to call it, CGI shot from the one trailer that people thought looked sloppy. You theorized it might be Bizarro. And he basically comes out and says it was a mistake in this piece. He says, yeah, so then he talks about the process of filming Superman. So here's the part that's interesting. Quote, the process has been similar to the first Guardians for me because I'm learning so much about how to shoot stuff with Superman, which is very different. Flying, figuring all that out, figuring out the simplicity, the elegance of this character who is so different than anyone I've ever written a movie for before. So I'm learning a lot. That's encouraging, right? That implies he's expanding his own horizons and not just trying to remake Guardians using DC characters. But then he talks about this commercial, and he basically talks about he said it was not a finished visual effects shot. So the part of him flying, it was a photograph of his face, and it was a photograph of a drone flying in front of an actual background. So the pieces were real, but it was incorporated in a funky way, and I didn't love the shot, so it's not even the shot that's in the movie. Sometimes I'm pretty strict about when I'm going through a trailer and looking at each shots, but the commercials, sometimes I forget to look at this closely. So that one kind of got by me, end quote. I thought that was an odd admission of not.
I don't know what he means by got by him. He saw everything. He had to have seen everything that was going by.
Agree with you.
You saw it, and you didn't. You saw it, and you thought it was fine until again you were told that it wasn't fine, and you cut it. You know, and that is where we have to be careful in terms of how involved you are in the final product, and that you have to have other people in the room or other people telling you, we don't think this is dope, whatever the case may be, and you have to sort of come to a sort of a yay or nay in terms of putting it out, right? So it didn't get by him. He saw it.
I'm with you. I think he thought it was fine. He said he okayed it. The blowback came, and he took it out. And it's fine. He took the feedback. James Gunn takes feedback, and we have no problem with that. But had people loved that shot, I guarantee you that shot would be in the movie. Yeah. So you know what I thought of what? Yeah. You know what? But you know what I thought of it. Here's the other version of that, but it led to the same result. Remember in The Dark Knight Rises when the trailer came out and nobody could understand Bane in the opening sequence, his voice? Remember the outcry about that? They're like, I can't understand what word this guy's saying. So remember how they remixed the audio. They remixed the audio for the final version to turn his voice up and clarify it. But you remember what Nolan said?
What did he say?
Nolan said, I don't care. He was like, it's not. So the director basically was like, the point is not for you to understand every word that he says. The point for you is to feel his presence as a character. I don't care if you can understand what he says or not. I think the studio that's one instance where the studio was like, yeah, we gotta tune this up a little bit. I don't think Christopher Nolan actually wanted them to tune it up. I think his general philosophy is kind of like audio and dialogue is kind of like, because he doesn't have actors record separately. He just records them on film and he remixes it, and that's the audio you get, which a lot of times leads to the distortion and the complaint that people have that they can't always understand what people are saying. But his defense has always been, it's not important. He's like, I'm making a symphony. He's like, you don't have to hear every note. The point is to hear the whole piece. But it reminded me of that, where people got so up in arms because they couldn't understand Tom Hardy, and the studio had to like turn his voice up so you could try.
You know what it reminds me?
I can't understand a word he's saying. It's not it's the accent. It's a little bit tough for me to hear that.
The one thing that he said, Brian, that I think although he is talking about, he's replacing the so many characters dialogue situation with Oppenheimer, but I think he's really also referring to Marvel and Doomsday and all the
He's not
characters.
talking about Oppenheimer. He's
Come
talking
on,
about
man.
Oppenheimer public. That quote is basically he was asked about, are you worried there's too confusing, too many characters? And he said Oppenheimer had 3 times as many speaking roles as Superman does. People will be fine. But as you said, the movie he's really talking about is Doomsday.
Hells yeah.
100%. 100%. I'm going to leave out, there's one he talks about, which we already knew. They don't want this universe to be so interconnected that you have to watch everything. And he basically is like, he's making sure the projects are accessible. Yes, the universe might be shared, but there's no requirement you see Superman to see Supergirl or vice versa. But then then EW asked him about Elseworlds. And I thought this was a good question because I think we have theorized that Elseworlds is effectively like a remnant universe for Matt Reeves, Todd Phillips, right? Like just stuff that was already in process. He claims it's not like that. And then he says, he gets a long thing, but then he drops in here, quote, there's definitely room for people to tell other stories. And when it's somebody who's important, like Matt Reeves, who I've had an admiration for a long time as one of the very, very few filmmakers who is out there making spectacle, commercial fare, and is also an artist, you have to stand up and listen. And the script still needs to be good. So he basically said, now, then he says, we're not going to make the film unless we like the script, but I think there are exceptions. I told it to one person who came in and pitched something that was an Elseworlds tale, and it was a very, very, very famous movie actor. I said, it depends on how the screenplay comes out. If it's a masterpiece, I'll make it, but it has to be a masterpiece. And he was like, I don't know if it's a masterpiece. He got all funny. He's still working on it, though. He is still trying to do it, so we'll see. Masterpiece might be pushing it, but it's got to be really great, end quote. There's a rumor about who this is. Have you heard the rumor about who he's talking about?
Mm-mm.
So leading rumor is that it's Tom Cruise, who just signed a multi-picture deal with Warner Brothers. And the rumor is he pitched James Gunn on something for DC.
Okay. I'm glad he's taking a stance on what it needs to be and not just because it's Tom Cruise. You know what I'm saying? It can't be just a name. I'm pitching this and we're going to get you all excited and we're doing it because it's me. Nah. The screenplay has to be dope. But him saying there has to be a masterpiece or has to be great sort of takes me back to something he said in that article as well, is that he's doing something that is just okay. And if everything has to be great or things have to be great, then I don't think is just okay works in what you're trying to do here. So it's either great or it's not. And if it's not, we shouldn't even be having the conversation, or it's something that we're working on to make it great. But it just can't be something that we're doing that's just okay. AKA Creature Commandos.
So I'm with you. I think so. This is where there's a little bit of like, he says the right thing, but I think us as consumers of James Gunn have questions. So he says basically, if it's an Elseworlds tale, it's worth telling something that it has to be worth telling something that might tend to confuse a few people. Meaning, also part of our thing is being really clear about what is Elseworlds and what is DCU. So this is kind of where we're getting into the Batman discussion again. I feel like he's hinting at. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is, so I wondered if this was a shot at Marvel, but I want your reaction to it. The other thing is not just giving away properties like their party favors to people doing low budget TV that we have no quality control over because we're making some money, making a few thousand on the rights. It's having some sense of quality control over everything, end quote. That felt like shade. I don't, but I was like, is it Marvel he's talking about because Marvel TV's been struggling, or is it just in general he's talking about something? It's just, that felt very specific. That felt very specific without being specific.
I mean, certainly he could be throwing shade at Marvel and what they're doing there because of what they've done.
They're not good at TV. We'll talk about their latest effort, but like, let's be honest, they're not good at TV.
No. They haven't
Not
been.
yet. Not yet. Yeah.
There was one thing that he said in his article regarding there's an idea that we had that we don't want other people to steal. I think that is a direct shot at them.
Yeah. It's WWF and WCW from back in
Yeah,
the day. That's what this
definitely.
is. I mean, that's what this is. So anyway, I just thought that comment was notable. But this all leads to, in the article, Clayface discussion.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like the example. Now, this is kind of the example, but then he actually, it's interesting. Where he says, the script is great. The first script was great. The new draft's even better. The movie's definitely getting made. He subsequently clarified this statement to say that the Mike Flanagan script is basically the script that is the story, that the revised script is a touch-up, a rework of that. It is not a rewrite of the entire story. So what we told you earlier about like the animated series informing the live action, all signs are pointing to that being the case for what they're going to shoot. But then he confirms Clayface is absolutely DCU and not Elseworlds. This is interesting because they ask him about this. And he says, we needed DCU content. That's a hell of an admission. And he's like, Mike, so here we go with the collaborator. Mike Flanagan is somebody I've been friendly with for a long time. He wrote me about Clayface, texted me really about it really early on in my DC journey. Just being honest, I did not think that was something that was going to happen, but he came in, he pitched the idea, and I was like, oh, bleep, that's cool. It's a body horror movie that just happens to be in the DCU. He wrote the script. The script is fantastic. We did not plan to do Clayface. That was really something that he brought to us. But then he says, because it's DCU, it's now part of the DCU. So this Clayface is a future DCU Batman villain. That's what that's telling you. But it wasn't because he planned it. It's because he was pitched it. That led to this whole thing for me of like things like the Rogues Gallery and things like these characters where it's like, how flexible is this universe to accommodate someone from the outside being like, hey, I've got it for this one character. And now they've got to integrate that character into everything else.
James Gunn needs dope characters or a dope rogue gallery for Batman. Two of them are sort of taken already. That it would be difficult for you to sort of, not necessarily replicate, but sort of introduce to people. So, and introducing them will cause people to then compare. And if they don't like yours, then you're not off to a good start. With introducing Clayface and doing this Clayface, which we think is going to possibly be fantastic, it is again an interesting scenario for James Gunn to be like, you know what? I wasn't even thinking about this, but now that it's here and it's dope, we might as well include him. Because what's the point of, if we wanted to do Clayface, what's the point of redoing him if we already have a dope one that hasn't even been done, but we'll include him into this world? So that Batman has someone to like, oh snap, I can't wait for when Batman needs to deal with this guy. It's just a perfect situation.
I do think it speaks to, as we go forward, to your point, Matt Reeves effectively took the Riddler off the board for a length of time. Not forever, but for a length of time. And the way he effectively claims Clayface in this, to me, is also saying that somewhere down the road, if someone else wanted to do an Elseworlds project set in the Batman universe, they would not be allowed to use Clayface. So, yes, they're okay with having our past Batman and DCU Batman, but they're not okay with having 3 Jokers running around or 4 Riddlers running around. Like, they just won't do that. Like, they just, so I do think there is this, and likewise, I think with the casting, I think it's part of why he doesn't want to cross over the casting, because of the confusion angle. Like, so for example, Barry Keoghan is the Joker in the Matt Reeves verse, right? He's the one in the cell. I don't think you'll ever see Barry Keoghan's Joker in James Gunn's DCU, because the second you do that, people will start saying, well, are they connected or are they separate?
And you can't really sort of finesse that to make sense.
And you can't go back. Like, once you do it, it's sort of like now that that's been crossed. So I think that's part of why he's also hesitant to bring Pattinson over, because the second he does it, it's kind of like, well, what is the line between one universe and the other? Yeah. So I thought this was like he is actually signaling to you, like, these characters get a label, and that's where they're going to be. Like, they are now that character's off limits to, if Tom Cruise wanted to pitch another Clayface, a project that has Clayface in it, that's not happening. Like that's, not that it is. Then Gunn talks about future stuff. So this is where I see like the scatterbrain James Gunn, the nerd in him, come to life in these answers. Because he is like, they start asking him about what's next, right? And he's like, there's another TV show. That's my favorite thing in all this. Hopefully that's getting made soon. My favorite thing. Starts to sound a little bit like Trump. And then there's the movie. Oh, bleep. I don't know what I'm allowed to say, but there's a couple other movies being written. One of them is in good shape. Another is kind of closer to the start. We feel positive about it. And then there's the thing I'm writing. Like, it's a lot. This is where I kind of lose James Gunn a little bit, because I'm just sort of like, this can't all be like what's actually going on here. And then he says, my actual favorite thing. So remember, he just said the one TV show is his favorite thing, right? That is, my favorite thing has not been announced at all. One of the scripts people kind of know about. My script people don't know about. The other script people don't know about. So mostly stuff people don't know about.
That's my favorite one.
So he's got a lot of favorite things right now. And then he says, is a Superman, they asked him Superman sequel, and he says, what I'm working on is in some way, I mean, yes, but is it a straight up Superman sequel? I would not say necessarily. I mean, Batman has to be somewhere in this answer, right? I mean, what else could get you that excited?
Yeah.
Booster Gold's not getting you that excited.
No. No. I mean, unless, you announce, what's that dude's name for Booster Gold? If they were to announce him as a Booster Gold character, I forget his name. He's popular. You like him.
Powell?
He was in top. Yeah.
Powell. He's not doing a Booster Gold project. He looks the part, but he's not doing it. Yeah.
It would be interesting. I think people will get excited for it because people like him, and
I agree. Well, they're going to be more excited after the Running Man, but
yeah. I can't wait for that.
And then he says, last thing on this point about directing versus writing.
Mm-hmm.
They asked, is there anything more you can say about this mystery project you're writing next, and is that the project you'll direct next? Well, I always leave saying I'm going to direct something till I'm done with the screenplay, and then I say, yeah, I want to do it. But it's probably what I will direct. Yeah, probably. To be totally realistic, yeah, probably. So if he's writing World's Finest, he directing World's Finest.
Hells yeah. Just like, go back to the tapes, go back to the archives when we talked about him writing Superman. And he's like, there's no way he's not going to direct this, yo. He can't leave the Superman is the first movie into the DCU, right? Considering how successful Superman needs to be, he cannot leave this in the hands of someone else. And I said back then, there's no way he's not directing it. And sure enough, a few weeks later, he announces that he's directing it. And the same way, I think when it comes to Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, I don't know about Wonder Woman, perhaps, maybe, I don't know, depending on if he's writing it. I think if he's writing it and he's excited about it, there's a likelihood that he may direct it. And so with this, World's Finest, there's no way he's not directing it. So expect an announcement after Superman. And there was a comment in there, or a question, will there be a cameo in Superman? And he said yes. He just said yes.
Oh, he just said, they asked him, are there other characters in Superman who have not been announced? And he said yes.
Yeah. So who do you, I mean, Batman is obviously one. Whether he's in it specifically, I don't know, but Wayne and stuff. Once you say Wayne or anything Gotham, anything Batman, it's like dogs' reactions. They're going to just like listen, perk up to hear what else, right? Or sort of dig to see what more information is out there, or can they get from this cameo or this possibility. So there's a lot that he has to deal with here.
Well, one is I would be shocked if you saw Bruce Wayne, just because that would give away the actor who's playing the character. I don't think he's ready to do that. And I think that to a lot of our prior discussions, if you did that, you would be submarining Superman in the process. because immediately I think so. If he has a surprise like awesome actor, like if he has Alan Ritchson or he has somebody and like the person shows up as Bruce Wayne, the amount of headlines and discussion that will go to that one scene will be not do any favors to Superman. So you can't do that. You can't do that.
We see the Superman movie. There's going to be a post-credit scene in this. If Bruce Wayne shows up, forget Batman, right? But Bruce Wayne shows up and is Alan Ritchson. Guaranteed $1 billion.
Just on the cameo.
Guaranteed, just off the cameo, Brian. Why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't Superman is already successful. Everybody loves Superman. Boom, boom, boom. Then post-credit scene, Alan Ritchson, Bruce Wayne shows up.
So, okay, we're on the opposite sides of this. I think if you were going to do it, I would rather go the Creature Commandos route, and I would rather show a flash of something Batman and not Bruce, because it doesn't give away who's playing him. It keeps the buzzy going about this.
Okay.
But like I don't even think you have to show, like Creature Commandos gave you a full silhouette. I don't even think you have to do that much. I think if you gave something that was almost like just a perspective, maybe you get like a piece of the head.
Something like Blade, something like
maybe you just see him pick something up and you see the gauntlet and you know
something
who's
like
there.
Something like what's that movie where Blade shows up and says something to Whitman or whatever his name was?
Oh yeah, in Eternals.
Yeah, a voice, and everybody, oh snap, that's Blade. But but something a little bit closer to what you're talking about. That's fine too.
That's what I would do. I would do power of suggestion to say that Batman is not only in the universe but has taken notice of events that have occurred in this movie. And he's investigating something, and that's your way in, because you don't want to do right. Like, so part of the problem with the Snyder and the Affleck thing is like the lead of Batman versus Superman immediately sets them up as opponents because they're replaying the destruction of Metropolis, and you're seeing Bruce's perspective on that, and you're seeing how much he looks up in the sky and hates what's happening. Right? You don't need that. All you want to do is basically say the pieces are on the board and they're headed toward each other in some fashion. So that to me is like show less, right? Thanos was like you caught a glimpse of the face, but you couldn't see his whole body. You couldn't even see his scale. You knew who it was. I think that's the way to go, and keep it under wraps. Keep people talking. Who is it? And like honestly, it could be a stunt man, because if you're in costume and the way you shoot it, you don't even need to reveal who it is yet. You just need to get people saying like, okay, like that's what's to come. I would be thrilled if that is a route we see as part of the post-credit or wrap-up to this movie.
Anything else, Brian, before we wrap this one up?
He did also talk about, not in this article, but I'll just bring it in because there's one other comment he made. There was some discussion about Sergeant Rock elsewhere, and then he talked about projects that weren't working. The conversation about Sergeant Rock, he admitted, he's like, he had Colin Farrell. So he admits Colin Farrell was Sergeant Rock, replacing Daniel Craig. They had supporting characters. They thought they were ready to go. And he claims he stalled the project because the script wasn't good enough. He's like, I couldn't let them shoot what had been handed in. He claims in the EW article the project is not dead, but he separately said elsewhere there was a project that he killed because it wasn't good enough. That got a lot of people wondering. I think people thought he was talking about Sergeant Rock, but he says in the EW project it's still moving forward. What do you think he's talking about? Do you think he's talking about the Authority? What do you think he's talking about that was on the board that is now not happening at all?
I still tend to think the Authority was a good idea because it could then lead to that Justice League story. That reading it was a thrill for me as a kid, and that was the White Martians. I think that still could be something that you bring the Justice League together that perhaps leads to even more with Brainiac. Because if you do Brainiac, you bring the Justice League together. You could still do the White Martians later, but I think the Authority would have been a good story to adapt. I forget the name of that storyline with the Justice League. It was a Grant Morrison
Okay.
book, but it could be that. It could be that.
I think it is that, and I think it's that for several reasons. One is he was pretty open about saying they were struggling with it in a prior interview and had kind of pushed it off. But I think it's also because it's a crowded marketplace for that type of crew. And we've talked about it, right? You've had in the last 10 years, you've had 2 Suicide Squad movies, one of which he did. You've had the proliferation of The Boys, now a Boys spinoff, which has been very successful on Amazon. And you just had Thunderbolts, which I know these aren't exactly the same, but the idea of these sort of anti-hero, non-traditional hero lineup has been done now a lot of times. And I think, especially with Thunderbolts not making money, I think they're having a rethink of like, can we do this with $100 million budget? Maybe not. But is this the wrong time? Are people just kind of over, like, do we wait for The Boys to end? Do we wait for that stuff to clear out and then bring something like this back years from now when people are sort of not as saturated with it? I think it's that. That's my working theory. What makes the most sense?
If James Gunn is listening, the Authority, I don't know if you've ever seen The Big Kahuna. That's with Kevin Spacey. I forget another character. I don't know if Danny DeVito was in that one. I'm not sure. But the movie was just in one room and these guys are just discussing stuff. The Authority could be low budget and have these guys in a room discussing the Justice League. And I don't think you need to totally have it in just one space where these guys or these characters are just talking. But you can have it where these guys are delivering their own brand of justice to people that perhaps deserve it, right? But the Justice League just handles it a different way. I think that sort of builds the contrast between the Justice League and how they deal their justice and how the Authority does that. I think there's a way to do it where they finally meet and then you have these 2 factions of groups. And I say group meaning people who believe in the Authority and what they do. And you have those that believe in what the Justice League do. And then you sort of get to a point where you have these groups go head on with Batman discovering who these guys really are. I think that for me tells a compelling story. Do you do it? I think it could be done with $100 million. Because you wouldn't necessarily, I think, have to have big stars in this movie, Brian.
No, I maybe one, but I mean, I don't think you need. Yeah, you don't.
Possibly,
you don't need a lot. Like, yeah, if you're doing it lower budget, you should be focusing on trying to get the characters over, not look who we got playing them, right?
And it shouldn't be a world extinction level event or Ellie in Deep Impact.
Well, what you're kind of talking about there, though, that sort of Justice League versus Authority style of there's a hint there of kind of X-Men versus Magneto's crew, right? I mean, you're kind of making a little parallel to they see the same problem, they attack the same problem, but philosophically the methods are different. You know, they're sort of after something sort of common, but they don't see, one sees it more totalitarian, one sees it more democratic. Like, you know, there's a whiff of that.
Yeah, and if you do the Authority, I think it should be a rated R film.
Well, that's interesting. I definitely think there's room for that. I think certainly like Clayface could really help. I mean, even though it's a horror movie, that could really help. If they get an R-rated success story on the board, it'll definitely embolden them to do, you know, a little bit more there. So yeah, I think there's room for it. But my sense is that's the one that, because I don't think when Gunn's talking about his favorite stuff that's in the works, I don't think
it ain't Waller
is what he's talking about. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that may have been tabled for a while. So we'll see. But
And remember, the authority. The Authority was the first one that he talked about when he started building his universe. So I don't think
it seemed the most Gunn thing, right?
Exactly. I don't think it's something that he would let go just like that. You know, I think it's something that I honestly think, man, if I had James Gunn's phone number and we're talking, I think he is building towards that. Again, I forget the name of that. I got to look that up. But he's building towards white Martians, and he's using. But
there's also an aspect. You said it, like, once he got involved with writing Superman, and if he is writing and is shepherding Batman, like, I don't care how much you love the Authority, the Suicide Squad, that's great. But, like, man, you get a chance to write. I mean, like, come on, like, anybody out there, whether you like James Gunn or whether you don't like James Gunn, if you were in his shoes and you had an opportunity to write and direct Superman and Batman, if you can look me in the eye and tell me you would say no, we're not having a conversation, because I know you're lying. I know you're lying.
Yeah. Like, if I saw James Gunn, I'd be like, I know you're directing World's Finest. I know it. I feel it.
I can feel it all the way down in my plums.
There's no way you're not doing anything else. And he'll probably just look at me and walk away. You know, with a smirk and be like, because there's no way you're giving this script that you're writing to get to someone else. Batman, Superman, done the right way.
The best would be like if he like denied it, but then he just looked and responded to you and said, "You peaked."
Brian, anything else? Because there's one thing I wanna ask you about, because one of our viewers asked me to ask you. He calls you the Professor. So he said, ask the Professor this: what sort of Batman suit, being that James Gunn is very comic book accurate, what sort of suit do you think Batman gets? Does he get the tights, the yellow emblem? What do you think he's gonna bring to the table regarding Batman's appearance?
Yes. So this is a great question. I would say everything we know about James Gunn, to me, would suggest some variant of the navy and gray would be in play. Don't you think? Because it's just not been done. It's not been attempted since Adam West, which doesn't count, right? So a modernized tech, somewhat super, enhanced version, but using the color scheme of the navy, gray, and yellow. I don't know what else we would expect, given it's Gunn and given what we see. Supergirl in particular, to me, the combination of him bringing back the trunks with Superman and Supergirl's costume that we've seen on set, to me, is the biggest indicator that you will see navy, gray, and yellow on Batman.
Yeah. There you go, Will Beats. The Professor answers your question.
That's my prediction. I've seen, by the way, speaking of prediction,
Prediction?
I love official studio box office predictions, because these are always designed to be like, hey, we did so great because we set the bar so low. So there's this number floating around that I had sent you about, like, I think the official Warner Brothers range for opening weekend US is 90 million to 125 for Superman. I wouldn't read too much into that, just because, like I said, that's a studio. That tells you the studio thinks it will be at least north of 100, because they want to be able to declare victory after the number. I don't think it's saying, like, because we've heard numbers in the, 150, 160, 175 range. Like, I think it could still get there, especially if the reviews are good. And that's just Warner Brothers saying they want to say they're happy no matter what the number is. But I guarantee you this: if it's 99, 97, they won't be happy.
Yeah.
They may say they're happy. They won't be happy.
Yeah. Definitely not. Definitely not. But yeah, let us know in the comment section below what you guys think about what we discussed in that Entertainment Weekly piece. Shout outs to the viewer who wanted us to talk about it. It was an interesting conversation, and hopefully it gives us insight into what the DCU and how the DCU works. And they don't have a necessarily they don't have a parliament, so to speak. They have a sort of way in terms of how they're doing things, with specific characters, with ideas that are presented in a way that could work. and James Gunn will try to make it happen.
It wouldn't shock me over time if they have a de facto parliament. What I mean by that is, we know Tom King would probably be like he's in the room, right? Generally speaking, whether you like his writing or not, he's in the room. I would venture to say over time, there'll be one or several collaborators who, once they're done with their project, the experience of working with Gunn or working at DC, it goes so well that they become what Gunn was to Marvel, which is you don't know they're there, but they're always there. I think that will happen. I think it's too early to say exactly who those will be, but I think there will be a few over time.
So yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, and we'll see you next time on the Nerd Gen Report.